We're here in Victoria at the Victoria Shamrocks office, learning about their personal history and the history of the game here on Vancouver Island. So with us here today, we've got Larry Smeltzer, who was one of the great goalies in the 1970s, and Larry's going to educate us on what that was like playing at that time, and very fortunate to have Larry here today with us. But Larry, you started out way back in Fergus.
That's right. Well, I was born in Fergus, but grew up on a farm outside of Fergus, about 5 or 6 miles out in the country. And so our barn burnt down, so we ended up moving to Fergus when I was about 11 years old. And so we look upon it now as a happy situation, but back then it was a little tragic. Yeah. I just remember meeting the kids in the neighborhood, and one of them marched up to me and said, "If you ever want to make any friends in Fergus, you better play lacrosse." So in Fergus, it was lacrosse in the summertime and hockey in the wintertime. That was it. You had to do it all. So then about 2 days later, they came and asked me, "Are you brave enough to be a goalie? Because our goalie hurt his toe." So I said, "Okay, I'll come give it a try." So I went into the practice. This is Pee-wee. I'd never been in a practice, didn't know what was going on, didn't know how to put the pads on. They had to show me. And 2 nights later, I was playing in Owen Sound, and we won that game 4-2. And that's the start of my career.
Wow, that was a great way to start things off.
And, yeah. I didn't know how to hold it. Knew nothing about the game. I just knew they told me to stop the ball.
So were you hooked on the game like right away, or did you come to it slowly?
No, immediately. Coach back then, his name was Cleve Self, and about 2 or 3 practices and a couple games in, I remember it was in Acton, Ontario, and on the stairwell of the old arena, he just stopped me and said, "You're going to be a good one, keep at it." Didn't know what he meant, but that stuck with me. So,
wow.
And so it was really lucky growing up in Fergus. Lacrosse was everything. Fergus is one of the oldest teams in Canada, right from Confederation, and continuously up till recently. They were a field lacrosse team, but I remember reading an article once that it was called Connettel's Farm, and they put up a snow fence in the shape of an arena, and the whole town came out to watch something called box lacrosse. And so, and then it was reported in the paper, "Oh, they love this game." I was in the right town. I was born in the right place, certainly. And when I grew up, the stores would always close at noon on Wednesdays. Just every store would shut down. And it was just tradition from the 1800s, because that's when the lacrosse games were played in the summer. So all the shopkeepers would shut down, so them and their staff and all their customers would go up and watch the lacrosse game.
Wow.
So quite a history. Yeah. And then I guess in the Depression era, the main factory was Beatty Brothers, who made Beatty washing machines. And so they were able to hire people during the Depression, and there was a lot of really good lacrosse players from Ontario got jobs in Fergus at Beatty Brothers. Wow. During the Depression. So a real history of lacrosse for sure. I was lucky to play in that town for sure.
So on your personal history, you played Fergus Miners for a while.
Yeah.
And then, so how long did you play with them, and then where did you go to after that?
Well, like I say, I started as a peewee, and and I played there right up to the end of midget. But I remember one game. It was funny because you shared your pads, you shared your stick, goaltenders. And I remember going to Owen Sound one night, playing the peewee game. The Bantam goalie had something happen there, so I took that sweater off, put on the Bantam sweater, went out and played that game. And then the third game, something happened with the juvenile goaltender, so I played that night 3 games for the Pee-wees, Pee-wees, Bantam, and Midgets, sorry. And so anyway, it was, that's just what it was like then. So it was just great. We just didn't have that organization, but boy, oh boy, we loved the game, and we had to be great innovators along the way. Okay. Kind of like this interview, we had to be great innovators.
Now, did you ever want to play out, or were you settled on goalie right from the beginning?
Well, when we played in people's backyards, which was all the time, I always wanted to play out, but in the game, even quickly, I kind of realized I kind of liked this spot, and It's just the way it worked out. So it was one of those serendipities that I ended up in the goal, and I was okay at it at first. So and there were rare commodity goalies at that time, so you never know where I was going to be playing, which team, bantam, midget, and juvenile, like I say. So you're up and down.
Okay, so you went through juvenile, did you, in Fergus? Or?
No, I finished. Well, what happened in 1969? I can remember Fergus is about 3 miles from Elora. Elora had the Mohawks, so which was Junior B at the time, and they had won the President's Cup 2 years in a row in 67, 68, and the OLA had a rule: if you win a national championship 2 years in a row, you must go up a level. So they went up to Junior A, but what happened was the majority of their team were 21 years old, and suddenly the Elora Mohawks have to play Junior A, and they've only got half a dozen players, so they raided the Fergus midget team. So none of us ever got to go to juvenile. We went over and we were suddenly juveniles just out of midget, or sorry, Junior A's just out of midget. And so that was my start in Junior A. That's how I ended up with 5 years in Junior A. And we were a horrible team. We would show up 12, 13 players. There's a lot of farmers, you know, if there were stones to be picked in the fields, they weren't coming to the lacrosse game. So we never knew how many players we had that night. I remember going to it was Port Credit Arena one time, and we had 13 players. That was our starting lineup against this fantastic port, guys like Pat Differ and Duffy McCarthy and all those guys. We would get outshot 80, 90, 100 to whatever. We were just, but what training grounds for a goaltender coming up, getting outshot, breakaway after breakaway on you. And by the time, mercifully, they put Elora back in Junior B, so off I headed to Bramalea. Nobody in the league really remembered me, but I sure remembered all those players. I had memorized everybody had so many shots. So I got off to a good start in Junior A. Down in Junior, I had no problem jumping in to that after that year in Elora, the training grounds.
And sorry, that was at Bramalea?
Bramalea Excelsiors at the time,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, at the time, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so we played at Victoria Arena, Victoria Park Arena in Bramalea. And I was still young, couldn't, or I guess I had my license. I used to have to hitchhike about an hour down to Brampton with my stick and duffel bag, and I'd have to decide which route I was going to take. Do I go through Orangeville today, or do I try it through Georgetown? Where do I feel lucky getting a ride?
Wow.
But I never missed a practice or a game hitchhiking around Ontario.
You're dedicated.
Yeah, I just had to be. You know, I've heard different stories today where if mom and dad can't drive you to the rink, then they don't show up at practice, right? So, different world. Different world now. So in my junior days, I started getting called up, so that's how I ended up playing in Windsor for Bishop, and I started playing, brought up senior for the Fergus Thistles. And I was still only 18 years old, maybe 19 years old. And I was up and in that semi-pro league when they interacted between the East and the West.
Was that 1968 or was that late, a little bit later?
Well, that was the early 70s, right, Nermal? And so anyway, it was back and forth between East and West. And so suddenly I was playing against the New Westminster Salmon Bellies. And those days, if they brought a goaltender up, that goaltender had to start the game. And so, which another good training grounds for me. I just remember playing the Salmon Bellies, and I just remember the only advice anybody gave me is, Paul Purnell has a very hard shot, so prepare for it. I just remember the first time I saw him with the ball, and I just remember, they also told me his favorite spot was this corner. So I just remember, okay, I'll give him that corner and cheat a bit. And I went to move my arm over there, hit me in the arm, my arm just dropped. That's how hard it was. So I learned very quickly he had a hard shot. So,
you played for Bishop a little bit at Windsor and Warlocks?
Yeah, and that was a turning point for me. Jim Bishop was known as a goalie killer almost, right? You know, a dime a dozen type thing, in and out. But so he brought me down from Fergus. So it was actually the first game I played for Windsor, and they were playing Peterborough at the time. And so anyway, two things happened. They flew me down to Windsor and put me in to Detroit, put me in first class. And I can't remember, it was the 70s, so everybody has a blue shirt and a big wide white tie. So first class, but they served us tomato sandwiches on the first class. I showed up to meet Bishop with tomato all over my so anyway.
As long as it wasn't blood.
Yes, it's off to a bad start with him showing up like that. The game started, so I had to start, like I say, because they brought you up, because it was always, if they're bringing somebody up, they say there's an injury, so that was to make sure they weren't horsing around. So first shot, 1-0 Peterborough, 2-0, 3-0, 4 shots, 4 goals. We're down 4-0 to Peterborough 5 minutes into the game. Bishop calls timeout, calls me over the bench, and all I could see was my whole career disappearing on me. I thought, this is Bishop watching me. I've done this. The crowd's just in disbelief. Over I go to the bench, and he puts his arm around me. He says, "Look, I flew you down here because I know you could do it. Get back out there." I thought, oh man. So out I go. So now that it's 4-0, the face-off. Johnny Davis from Peterborough is out on the floor. He gets the ball, and he comes down a clear-cut break. So now my moment of truth is Johnny Davis's breakaway coming down. And he was one of those guys that was all like this. And he did this one where he went across, but he had dropped the ball, and I spotted it, and I just hooked it. We ended up winning the game 21-7, and I got first start. And I figured that was Jim Bishop at that time could have broken me, but instead he made me.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was a goalie maker in my situation.
So you were how old in that game, roughly?
I don't know, I'd have to look it up. I was a teenager, maybe 19.
Maybe 19, okay.
Yeah, I had been playing for the Brampton Excelsiors senior team at that before, and I'd been playing, so down to Windsor. It was a good experience for me down there.
And then when did you finally move up to majors or senior A?
Well, I came out of junior when the draft was in '74 for Pro League. So Rochester had drafted me in the first, not the goalie round, the very first round. So I was the original Rochester Griffin. And anyway, at that time, they were only paying $50 a game. I was making more of that when I was down in Windsor. I said, no, I want 75. So me and Cal's got in a holdout over $50 or $75. So finally I said, okay, I'll go back to Fergus. So I went back to Fergus and played 3 games because, not unless I get $75 a game. Well, you're a rookie. I said, I've been playing around this league a long time. So anyway, suddenly I get a call one night, and it's Jimmy Higgs. And he's in Syracuse, and he says, will you play for us if Rochester trades you? And I said, as long as I get $75 a game, but we're only paying 50. And I said, 75 or I keep playing for the Thistles. And I knew Jimmy Higgs from playing in Windsor, because he was playing for them at the time. He says, I'll phone you back in 10 minutes. So they phoned back in 10. Okay, you got your 75. Okay, I'll be down there then. So I drove down right away. To Syracuse. It wasn't far from Ontario.
And that was 74, and you played with guys like Travis Cook and
Russell
George and
Jimmy Miller.
And,
yeah. It was a great experience being there. And one of the neatest guys, I want to talk about goaltending just very quickly. Back when I started, they would go, a coach would say, even when I was that bantam kid or pee-wee kid, I know nothing about goaltending. Just go back and figure it out yourself. This is a 12-year-old kid or 11-year-old. Okay, back. But they made us, that was the same on every team. So in our era, going through them in junior and even through the Pro League, the goaltenders were all individual. You could, because they'd all developed their own style and we were all copycats. We all watched each other and trying to see what worked, and everybody had to figure out how to be a goaltender at that time. But it was just always the same, no matter what. Even up in the Pro League, like me to Mark, no, I don't know what you're doing. Just go back and figure it out. So I think today's world, they go, coach goes, I know nothing about goaltending, but just go back in the net. And this is the way you got to do it, because this is the way everybody else does it. So it was a different world. The innovation has gone out of my mind. So it was a time we had to innovate. Our pads were terrible. We had to invent our pads. Between periods, you'd be taping sponges on your pads, or those fibers out of the hockey pants, and it would all come loose. We were all hurt all the time. We were so bruised up at the end of the summer. We had, even our equipment started out with a baseball catcher's little mask with all of your head showing, a little rusty hinged throat guard, and we had hockey pants and goalie belly pads from hockey and the shoulder pads from hockey. But the lacrosse ball hits you, it's like a cannonball, where a hockey puck hit you, it kind of glances off you. So there was no such thing as the Under Armour or anything like that at that time. So between periods, you would have to move our pads because we got hit there. We discovered another bare spot where we got hit, and we'd have to do it. So lots of innovation. When I got down to Syracuse, I met Alfie Jacks, who you had talked to, and Alfie was showing me the sticks he made. And this isn't one that Alfie made, but what he helped me do, I had no business being a goalie. Short, slow, no reach. I could sprint a bit to the corner. That's why one of the reasons Cal didn't really want me more than Cal's. He wanted a goalie racing up the floor and handling the ball, and those guys, some of those guys are great. Buff McCready, nobody better than him. Donnie Crocker out of the Lakeshore. Well, I couldn't do that, and I just remember Merv Marshall, the great Merv Marshall from Huntsville. He just said to Morley, it was so funny, he says, if you wanted a forward, you should have drafted a forward, he said. But Morley had that system, and he wanted the goalie. That was one of the reasons I think he wanted me to go to Syracuse as well. Not just the $75. He didn't think I'd ever be part of this. But what Alfie taught me is a few things here. The stick here, he made it off center, so that was one of the ones that would stop. Can I stand up? So that my stance was like this, with this stick that's off center, and balls never went under. And I had this up here so that I would always remember to hold it high and keep my stick on the floor, and I had to learn how to do this. Today when I teach kids, the hardest thing to teach them is get your thumb out of that stick, because every time you stand up, you lift the stick. It's impossible. It's really hard. They forget it. So, made the stick longer, and that was so I could reach into scrums and get the ball. I could reach over people's heads, right? Because I'm pretty short and pretty slow. Yeah. And so anyway, that was one of the things I learned down there. So that stop in Syracuse, Alfie was just a great help to me. Just a nice guy. And I actually, such a nice guy, he got bumped off the team because I got brought there. And I was kind of embarrassed about that. He was so gracious. He just came. He was like my best cheerleader there. So that just shows the character. And meeting guys, like I said, like Jimmy and Travis and Russ George, that was great. I bet you when you talk to those guys, it was funny, because they are funny guys, especially Russ.
So some of the adjectives that are written about you, rotund and burly, but quick. That's how they describe you. So you must have moved very fast within an area that was important around the crease.
It was that low center of gravity. Maybe I was just falling over, stumbling. Maybe I was just awkward. But, I guess I was in the right place at the right time, playing the right sport. Yeah. And then, like, Syracuse was a rough year from what I've heard, but a lot of core values were created that year that were carried forward the next year to Quebec, right? Well, in Syracuse, there's lots of things were going wrong management-wise, but paychecks were bouncing. I remember we get our paycheck. It was with an elastic on a lacrosse ball, and they'd bounce it to us. There's your check, and first 5 get to the bank. So we had to turn around. If you got your check cashed, you just had to loan money to everybody else, because we're all living down there at the time. So there was lots of drama, and there was a lot of hardship, but the team pulled together. So I always said, when you talk about the Quebec Caribou, you must talk about the Syracuse Stingers, because we went through a lot of adversity, and the core team that went to Quebec had been through.
Right.
You know, we'd show up at an airport in Toronto one time. The bus took off. They didn't think they were going to pay it, so we ended up renting limousines to go to play a game in Maple Leaf Gardens. We were late getting to the game, and the Toronto team said, "What's going on?" They're looking up, waiting for the bus, and suddenly these 4 limousines pull up and a bunch of lacrosse players come out. And the starting lineup, first 5 players and first goalie on the floor, the starting warm-up, or the starting lineup. So there was lots of those types of stories. So out of it, there was a lot of happy times too, and pulling together, and that's because when we started in Quebec, eventually there was a lot of adversary there too. There was so much potential, and then we went into a slump there.
Show us the sweater that you wore back then.
Well, this is a replica.
Okay.
Yeah, mine probably a little more sweat and blood on it. This was the famous caribou, caribou sweater there, and
wow.
I heard my original sweater. Somebody bought it in Quebec and is walking around Quebec City with it right now, still wearing it out. I'd love to go there and bump into him in the streets someday. But anyway, so Syracuse was really the building block, because at the end of the year, the unbelievable happened, because we weren't going to be in the playoffs, it looked like, because they had to shorten the season a bit. And suddenly that threw our arithmetic off. So we had to win 8 out of our last 9 games, and I think Philadelphia had to lose all 8 of their games. And that's exactly what happened, and we marched into the playoffs. If Jimmy Wasson's hearing this, he hates that story. So, but you know, I can't say enough good things about Syracuse. The friends I met along the way. Gaylord Paulus was there at the time too. What a, you know, there's a legend. I remember one time when I was a kid, it was an exhibition game. The Oshawa Green Gales were coming to play the Fergus Thistles for some. There was standing room only in the arena, and they're standing just trying to get a glimpse of Gaylord. And then I find myself 6 or 7 years later playing with him. First time I played against Gaylord was in Brantford. I got brought up, I guess the Excelsiors. And Gaylord was out, opening face-off, did a give and go. It was like a 2-on-1 breakaway coming down. He stopped at the dotted line, wound up as hard as he could, and hit me right in the face.
That's hello?
I met him, it was the first time I met him in Syracuse. I said, "Do you remember the first time?" "Yeah." I said, "What'd you do?" "I hit you in the face." "Why'd you do that?" "Want to see what you're made of," because I was only a junior. So,
wow.
I learned so much from him, and after games, you'd often be up half the night with him. He always had this 6-pack of Coke, and he'd have to work through this cans of Coke. But he could tell every play, go, "In this face-off, we should have done that, and this should have that."
Really?
I learned how to think about the game.
Wow.
So from him. So Syracuse, lots of good stuff. So that's all we remember is the good stuff out of Syracuse.
Then Quebec City, you guys really came on. Didn't you upset the Tomahawks, I think? Or
Yeah. Went down though, but we're feeling good. We had just done that, won our 8 out of 9 to get in there, so we're on a bit of a roll. And you know, on paper, we didn't have a chance. But boy, oh boy, we had the spirit and the camaraderie, and this. We had learned to never give up. That's one thing we learned in Syracuse. One thing: never give up, no matter how much the odds are stacked. Never give up. We had to give up our apartments even during that run, and people would feel sorry. We wouldn't give them up. I said, no, we're going to be here. We're going to win it all. Oh, they're deluded. And they said, but that was how deep our belief was that we were going to win that year. And knocking off the Tomahawks, that was, we just wanted to win that one game, which we did down there, and we stole that game. We knew they weren't going to beat us in our own arena anymore, because now the crowds were showing up, and it's unbelievable, and which we did. We won in 6 games.
And then you play. Who did you play in the championship series?
Montreal.
So this what a rivalry! Huh?
What a rivalry.
Yeah.
The whole province of Quebec was watching this one. And again, it's just, it was electric. It was electric in the Montreal Forum, and it was electric in the Colisée. And you got Ernie Mitchell on top of his. Dave Evans had been hurt. To me, Ernie, my favorite goalie I ever watched, right? Talk about never giving up. That was Ernie, for sure. And I think I had a little bit of that in me. But I just loved watching him. And he was probably the only guy in the league. My goalie might have been shorter than me a little bit. So.
Now, I heard when you won,
Yeah.
like they had a parade for you in Quebec City, and
Yeah, they did. Yeah, the mayor declared a holiday. We were paraded through the old city, and we were. It was Travis and Travis and myself. We were lucky. We were kind of featured, and I got to meet a lot of people. At that time, I was lucky. I could speak enough conversational French to get by on, and so I always, any type of ceremony I got on, I was kind of there as
representative,
the baby translator, baby talk translator. But, it was a great experience, and the streets were lined with people. I don't know whether it was the fact that we won or just the fact we beat Montreal.
Now, like, unfortunately, reality hit the NLL soon after, right?
Yeah.
Right? And how did you, like, what were you thinking when you won? And then, did you think you had a number of years to be able to play there, or like, what happened?
Well, I was thinking my contract was over, and I just won the MVP, and I was looking forward to negotiations in spring. I learned on the TV, it was Channel 11 out of Hamilton, all of a sudden, and another pro league has folded, and then the NLL, and I thought, yeah, that's how I heard.
Yeah.
And, but again, living in Fergus paid off for me, because the OLA, because the NLL was, at that time, was an outlaw league. Oh. And so the OLA mandated that only 2 ex-pros could play on any team. So that meant out of the whole Ontario pool of lacrosse players, only 12 got to play senior A lacrosse that year. 12, I think they upped it to 3. So maybe 18 players out of 100 and some. But I lived in Fergus, so it was easy for me to make a team because I lived there. So.
No, eventually you came out to the Shamrocks, right? Like, when did that happen?
I'd like to tell a little backstory
Sure,
on this
yes,
if I could.
Yeah.
Because you guys can edit anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that first year of Pee Wee back in Fergus, there was, like minor lacrosse, did a banquet at the end. And the speaker was Bob Dobie, who was Dane Dobie's grandfather from Fergus. He was the speaker, and his topic was winning a Mann Cup in Victoria, BC. And I did not know what a Mann Cup was, and I didn't know where Victoria, BC was, and I'd only played about 8-10 games in my life, but the table, I looked, someday I'm going to win a Mann Cup in Victoria, and they all laughed. The whole table just erupted laughing. I said, no, I'm gonna, and that was always in the back of my mind, to make it to Victoria and win a Mann Cup, which happened in '79.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so really right after, like, you left how many years
Well,
after the pro league?
I played that OLA in '76
Okay.
for Fergus, and I was lucky enough there to win the MVP in that league. So I was doing well back there, but I still had this hankering to come to Victoria because that was the unfinished business for me. But Dave Durante had, he wanted me to go to Coquitlam, and I said, I don't want to go to Coquitlam. But they phoned me. It was Bob, Salt, and Solon Gill, and they said, we want you to come to play for Coquitlam. Well, I'll come out and have a look, but I'll only come in one condition, that you let me go talk to the Shamrocks. I'm there, because that's where my heart is, playing for Shamrocks. Well, have you been there? No. I just remember his words. Well, they're a bunch of losers. I'm like, well, one more loser isn't going to bother them. So anyway, I came out, and good to their word, they took me to Dave Durante drove me to the ferry terminal, and Kenny Alexander picked me up on this side. And then I got to meet the Shamrocks and ended up on the team here. So we didn't win 77, but in 79 we won for sure. And then at that stage, I just thought, okay, I can't think of anything else I want to do. And that was basically enough lacrosse for me almost. I did play the 80 season, but at that stage I thought, I got to get on with life here. And
how old were you then?
32, I guess.
32.
And then I ended up just retiring, basically. I went back to Fergus and did some stuff back there and played there. But like I say, I just finished it off, came back out here, and there was a pickup league I was playing in. Next thing you know, I was being picked up with the Shamrocks, but then the North Shore Indians, they asked me to come and play for them. And so I went over and played for them for the President's Cup. The game went into, I believe it's double overtime. I got an assist on the winning goal and said, I'm going out like Lanny McDonald. I'm never playing another minute of lacrosse. I'm going out a winner, and this is the only way I can do it. So.
Well, when you were with the Shamrocks the first time, you won WLA Goalie of the Year 4 times, right, during that time?
Yeah.
Which is really an accomplishment. It's been written about.
Yeah, it was good, but I credit 2 people for that. One is Stan Shillington, and the other is Dave Evans. Stan was the stats guy. Once a week, come to the dressing room and I'd read. Dave Evans is catching me, so I'd bring my A game to every game, and I figure I can't let more than 9 goals in this game or Dave's going to pass me. And that's why I always say, thanks to him, I won those trophies, and my whole purpose. And he's such a nice guy. We joked about it. But that was it. I just wanted to win, and I was lucky. I was fortunate, but it was a tight race between Dave and myself. We ended up playing together in a Mann Cup together, winning for the Berards too. But the goaltenders have always, every goaltender I've ever met's been a great guy, and I think it was that innovation and isolation and copycat stuff. We all got to know each other and learn from each other, and we liked each other. And that's where that camaraderie was at that time. Different era, a different game. You just never knew what was going to happen, but it was fun. It was fun.
Now, just a couple of questions out of context. Was that shot from Gaylord the hardest you were ever hit?
No, the hardest I was ever hit was Kevy Alexander, when he was playing for Nanaimo. And it was the end of the second period. He broke my mask, cut me really badly. I knew he was doing it on purpose, but that's part of the game. So anyway, there's a couple minutes left. The doctor was in the dressing room, went in. They stitched me up. I said, I can't let you back. And I said, you have to. They said, there's no time for even freezing. I said, just stitch me. So they stitched me. And then he goes, well, the freezing hurts as much as the stitching anyway. You shouldn't be going out there. I have to. If I don't go out and face Kevy again, from then on, I'm going to face nothing but headshots for the rest of my career. So I went out, and sure enough, the shots went high. We ended up winning the game, and it was all good. So that just shows the I don't know, the spirit. I bet you when you talk to Jimmy and Travis and Russ, they talked about the creator giving them the game, and I will say. The creator also gave the goalies the spirit of a goaltender to make the game exciting, and every goaltender I've met had that spirit in them. So,
very good.
Yeah.